This is an episode of my podcast, Self-Love and Spiritual Growth. You can find links to my podcast in the description below. Thank you for listening. Welcome to Self-Love and Spiritual Growth with Natasha Hynes, where I remind you that you came here to be the light in a dark world. So yeah, sometimes it's gonna hurt. Sometimes it might even feel like you're not gonna make it through, but you can. And you will. You're doing better than you even know. Welcome to Self-Love and Spiritual Growth with myself, Natasha Hynes. Welcome. Today we're going to be talking about why some people tend to take a lot more crap than other people. And we're going to focus a little bit on empaths because I originally wanted to call this why empaths tend to take more crap from people than the average person. But then I realized that there is probably a lot of people out there that don't even realize they are an empath. So hopefully by getting you in the door with the whole general statement, I'll be able to describe what an empath is and what their life is like and what they experience, so that if you are an empath, you will now know. And not only that, but some people may not be an empath, but also have to deal with a lot of the same crap that we do. So I'm going to start this off by describing what an empath is. So if you are not sure that you are an empath, or you don't even know what an empath is and you're curious, I'm going to give you 10 signs of what is an empath, or if someone is an empath. And this is not necessarily an exhaustive list, meaning there could be other things that I did not think of to put on this list, or you may experience some or most or whatever of these signs and not all of them, or you might believe you are an empath and not experience any of these things, which would be really weird. But I'm open to possibilities. Meaning, just because this list doesn't necessarily describe you, doesn't mean you are not an empath. So trust yourself. The first two on this list are basically the key foundational aspects of what it is to be an empath. So if you are an empath, you probably have these two things. So the first one is that you're emotionally sensitive. And there's a caveat to that, because I'll get to that at the end of the list, but it is true that you may be at a point where you are not emotionally sensitive and you are still an empath, and there is a reason for that. But most empaths, at least at some point in their life, especially when they're young, tend to be very emotionally sensitive, meaning they might cry easily or be hurt easily, take things personally sometimes, or anything that could trigger them emotionally may have a stronger effect on an empath. And it's very sad, because that's a positive quality that has been misconstrued as a weakness. We've been told that it's a weakness and that it's something that we should solve or heal or eliminate, making people feel, especially men, making people feel like they should not feel their feelings, that they should be ashamed when they do, and they should just squash it all down, make it go away, just to be easier for other people to deal with. And that has led to so much problems in society that we are dealing with now and trying to heal. So if you are a sensitive person, I want you to know that that is not a problem to be solved. That is something to be explored so that you can have a better understanding of it and how to use it in a positive way and not let it overwhelm you. And if you have a child who is considered overly sensitive or very sensitive, You might have an empath child. You might have an empathic child. And they may very likely be someone who came here to heal, to do a big job. And pushing them to be less sensitive, or a lot of the times children like this, I've seen them, don't tend to want necessarily to be in crowds of other kids, or they might kind of stick around the parents or want to be alone a lot. That's another sign of being an empath, and forcing them to interact with other kids because you think that there's something wrong with them, or because they're antisocial and you want to teach them how to socialize, isn't necessarily going to benefit them. Because yes, we want them to have social skills, but also if they are avoiding other kids, there might be a reason. You know, they might be overwhelmed by feeling all these other kids' feelings, and the noise and everything that comes from other kids and crowds of kids that might just overwhelm their senses. So my best advice to you would be just to be aware of that, and aware that maybe they are experiencing this for a reason, because they're different, and it's not a bad different, but it might be a really good different. The second thing on the list of the basics of being an empath is that you feel bad for others, meaning you can feel bad for people, for animals, for plants. You can even feel bad for things. If you've ever seen a kid who cries when you throw a thing out, like a toy or like a piece of paper, or just the weirdest thing that you don't understand why they're so upset, and it's almost comical to you, because why are they getting so upset? Because you threw something out or you broke something that was just a thing. It's just a thing, you know? It's just a thing, honey. We could go to get another one at the store. It's just a thing. It doesn't really have feelings. But that kid isn't necessarily experiencing life the way you are, and they might be so empathetic that they can perceive the soul energy, the creation energy inside that thing. So those two things, being emotionally sensitive and feeling bad for others, feeling their pain, are the two basic things of being an empath. The two basic attributes of being an empath. If you feel those things, you are, or have in the past at any point, there's a good chance that you are an empath. The next one is that you tend to attract narcissists and predators. So getting into the whole why some people take more crap than others in life, empaths tend to be a giant, bright light for the moths of narcissism, because we are the perfect prey for not only narcissists, but psychopaths, drug addicts, alcoholics, whoever may be some sort of predator, or an energy vampire, or even just toxic people in general that have not healed yet. And listen, most of us have been toxic at some point. Many of us are still toxic to some degree, and it's not a bad thing to be toxic. Okay, I'm not criticizing people who are toxic, but it is something that we need to be aware of, because oftentimes we are put in situations where we need to protect ourselves, and being aware of the toxicity level in other people or in an environment gives us the chance to do so, to protect ourselves. But empaths tend to attract predators because we overgive, we want to heal and fix others, we have porous boundaries, or none at all, or just bad boundaries. We have a lot to give, and also a lot of people that don't have that light within them, like a narcissist, for example, will be jealous of an empath's light or positivity and want to put that light out just out of spite. We also tend to trigger people, meaning if people have things within them that they, insecurities, traumas, stuff like that, they haven't looked at, the shadow parts of themselves that they haven't dealt with and maybe not ready to deal with, when they are around an empath, we tend to trigger them. They tend to have to face those things. They get the shadow parts of them get pushed to the surface. A lot like the twin flame thing, which we're not going to get into, but many of you are familiar with it, so I'm going to use that as an example. But a lot of our shadow parts get pushed to the surface when you're around an empath. So they get triggered. And when someone is triggered, they lash out. And when they get triggered around us, they lash out at us because we're in the way. We are in the blast radius of their stuff. The next thing is that we tend to know things about people, even if they don't tell us, meaning how they feel or what they're thinking and even why, especially if they're lying to us. A lot of the time that makes us feel paranoid. It puts us in a situation where we know that, I'm sure a lot of you are going to relate to this, you know that someone is doing something behind your back or saying something behind your back, that they're doing something not cool. You know, even though they have not told you and that you have no evidence, but you know. But when you bring it up with them, obviously they deny it. And not only do they deny it, but now they're feeling vulnerable because you know things that they were trying to hide. And in order to get their power back, they overcompensate by not just denying that what you're saying is true, like telling you that it's not true, but also by getting really, really mad and, turning things around on you. And now you're a terrible person. You're mean. You don't trust them. You're this, you're that, whatever, to turn the tables and put the focus on everything being your fault. And they're not doing anything wrong. And it's your fault for not trusting them. So fast forward a little bit down the line, and guess what? A lot of the time, you find out that what you were suspicious of was true. And that is because empaths have a very good spidey sense. We know. The next one is that people can feel you. I don't think too many people talk about this. Being an empath, in my experience, is not just about feeling others, but we tend to emit a lot of energy as well. And that's why it's important to keep our energy in check, to make sure that we are processing our feelings and healing when it needs to be healed and purging the things that need to be purged, so that we're not just walking around as these angry, miserable, resentful people, because other people can feel us. As an empath, when you walk into a room, you can feel the vibe of the room. Okay? So you can tell when, let's say there was an argument going on right before you walk in and you know how bad that argument was in the moment that you walk into that room. You're like, whoa, something happened here, before you even see it on people's faces. But the opposite is true as well. So even people who are not empathic have an easier time feeling an empath because we emit. So we have a responsibility to heal and to project or emit light and love. That's why if anyone listens to Dolores Cannon or anything like that, you may have heard that one of the waves of volunteers came here to just be, to exist, to walk among the people, and that their frequency would have an effect on other people. Well, that's what it is. That's what I'm talking about. So people have told me that if I walk into a room that they can feel me, but they can feel me in a room over, they can feel me in 2 rooms over, depending on how intense what I'm feeling is feeling. So if you're an empath, you might be able to relate to this, that if you're very, very, very angry, you will have an effect on everybody else in the building, basically, probably. And the same goes for if you are elated. If you are in a state of absolute loving gratitude, you will also change the people around you. And one of the biggest benefits to that is that we may likely have a powerful impact on manifestation because of it. Because the power behind manifestation is not just about the thought. It is about the intention and the desire behind the thought that pushes it. The more intense the desire is, the more intense the intention or the feeling is behind that desire or that want or whatever it is you're trying to manifest, the easier, the quicker it comes. So if an empath has a wider scale of ability to emote, or for that energy to have an effect, then I would say we probably have an easier time manifesting. And if you disagree, that's cool, but I think that maybe give it a shot. Try it. Try manifesting stuff by feeling intense love and gratitude for what it is that you're trying to manifest. The next one is that you might have numbed out to cope. Okay, so going back to what I was saying about being emotionally sensitive, we aren't necessarily emotionally sensitive all our lives, because a lot of the time, just in order to cope, because it's so overwhelming, plus all the trauma from being abused, from being targeted by predators and whatnot, we often tend to have at least periods of time during life where we numb out, meaning we'll use alcohol, drugs, or whatever to distract us from our feelings or from feeling other people. Or we might just bottle it all up and push it down, do whatever we have to do to not feel the intensity of everything that's being thrown at us. And some of us can get really good at blocking out our feelings. And that's not a good thing. It's important. It serves a purpose when you need to experience that. Okay? So if you're in a point of time where you are experiencing that or have experienced it in the past, I'm not saying that you shouldn't have done that or that you shouldn't be doing that. I'm saying that it served a purpose. However, in order to heal, in order to experience your best life, you want to get to a point where you can process your feelings, where you can transmute energy, and where you can feel and not be overwhelmed. And that happens after doing the work and healing. So if you are doing things to numb out, or if you have done things to numb out, it still might be a sign that you are an empath. The next one, which I thought for a long time was just a sign that I was on the autism spectrum or something, but getting dizzy and overwhelmed in public places. You don't like large groups of people. When I was in my 20s, I thought I liked large crowds, but when I think back, I never did. Like going clubbing, I used to think that I liked it, but what I was doing at the time was really escaping the pain that I felt from the abuse I was living through. But in reality, I just felt alone in a crowd. The music was too loud, and all I wanted to do was I don't know, be alone, go home, listen to the music, be completely overwhelmed and absorbed in the music, do some drugs, whatever, just get trashed out of my mind so that I didn't have to feel my feelings, which is also going back to numbing out. So in some situations, you might see large crowds as a way to numb out. But if you are an empath, most likely you're not most comfortable in a big crowd, because whether you realize what's going on or not, or what you don't like or not, you're feeling everything going on around you, and it's overwhelming and it's not fun. I can't even go grocery shopping in the middle of the day or on a Saturday morning when everyone else is there. I mean, I do if I have to. I'll force myself. It's not like it's a phobia or a handicap or something like that, but I tend to go on like a Saturday night at like 9:30 at night on a Saturday when no one else is there. It's my favorite time to shop, because when I go in on a Saturday morning, I feel like I'm going to pass out. I'm dizzy. I feel like I can't see. I feel like the only thing I can focus on are 2 inches in front of my face, and everything around me is completely chaotic. And I can't function. The next one is you feel other people's feelings or thoughts as if they are your own. So never mind just being able to feel other people, but now you're feeling their feelings as if you're feeling them. And that is probably one of the biggest struggles that empaths have, because it gets really confusing. For example, when I'm around people who smoke, I don't smoke anymore, but when I'm around people who smoke, I tend to crave cigarettes. I can feel them fiending. So I get that for alcohol as well. When I'm around alcoholics or drug addicts, I could just, and it's so weird because I always forget in the moment. I'm just like, yeah, you know what? I really want a joint right now. It's like I haven't smoked weed in like 2 years. Why would I want a joint? But then if I think about it, I'm sitting beside a pothead. Then I realize, okay, I'm not feeling me, I'm feeling them. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with smoking weed. I'm just saying that it's not my craving. So I can feel people fiend for cigarettes. I can feel them fiend for alcohol. I can feel them fiend for whatever they're fiending for. The same thing goes for anger, sadness, anxiety, fear, depression. Not only is this not good to be confused about what you're feeling and what they're feeling, but also it leads to some pretty bad, unnecessary arguments. If they're mad and you weren't mad 2 seconds ago, but now you're mad because you're feeling them being mad, and then you start arguing over something just because you're feeling them feel being mad. Or if you're trying to quit something and then you end up falling off the wagon because you're around the wrong person. The last thing on the list is that you tend to be introverted. If you don't like crowds, then, if people affect you like that, it makes sense that you would want to be by yourself a lot, because it's easier to deal with life when you only have to deal with your own feelings and your own cravings instead of dealing with everybody else's around you. But again, even though that may serve a purpose when it's necessary, it's not where you want to stay, because isolation has its own damaging attributes, like it encourages depression, and we need connection with people to survive and to thrive. Just to be even physically healthy, we need connection. And that should be a good segue to lead into the topic of why some people take more crap than others. So we've already talked about how empaths tend to be targeted by predators, which, by the way, I get really deep into in my free course, Self-Love for Empaths, which you can find a link to on my website, which is linked in the description. I might actually link directly to the course in the description. It's free if you want to sign up, but I dive deep into that. But there's two other big things that I want to talk about in terms of why some people take more crap than others, especially empaths. The first being that empaths tend to grow up in toxic environments, which I also get into in my course, the why that happens and all of that. But since we tend to grow up in toxic homes, as an empath, we tend to be more in touch with our feelings. We also tend to be souls who came here with the purpose of healing, and healing not just ourselves, but other people. So we do the work. And because we do the work, because we focus on healing, we not only tend to be aware of the shady things that are going on around us, the not kosher things that are going on around us in a toxic home, but we also tend to shine a light on it. We're the ones that say, hey, that's not okay. Because we feel not just our pain, but the other person's pain. We feel the pain, right? So when we see an injustice, we call it out. That's not okay. Don't say that to them. Don't treat them like that. And when we do that, when we shine a light on the things that are not okay, we are not conforming to the toxicity. We're not conforming to the narcissist's rules or the alcoholic's rules or whatever. The rules of pretend everything's okay, so no one has to change, so no one has to deal with themselves, so everyone can live in denial. Toxic families and toxic environments thrive on denial. So as soon as you start pointing things out that are not okay, that should be fixed, that aren't true, you become a target because you make everyone else feel uncomfortable, because it's uncomfortable to look at it. It's uncomfortable to accept that things aren't okay. It's uncomfortable to look at yourself and what you're doing wrong and your own pain and accept that things are not okay. It's uncomfortable. It makes people feel anxious and embarrassed and ashamed and hurt, angry, sad, all of it. And when they feel those things, they don't want to feel them. And instead of dealing with themselves and asking themselves, why do I feel like this? Maybe I can change this. Instead, they target you and they say, you said a thing then that caused me to feel uncomfortable or unhappy. Therefore, you are the problem. So you, as the empath, as the seer of things that are wrong, become targeted by the entire group. You become the scapegoat. And they all start to conspire against you because it's easier for them to target you and tell you that you're the reason that they're feeling bad than to take responsibility for their own feelings. And it sucks because, well, it sucks for a lot of reasons, but it sucks because you're the most emotionally healthy and mature person in the entire group, and the person with the most potential to have a happy life and to heal. But first you got to take on all that crap, which is on some level a blessing in disguise. Because if you can take responsibility for your pain, for your stuff, and heal it, then you can get to the other side of being happy and you learn lessons that make you wiser and stronger. And the more they crap all over you, the more stuff you have to heal. However, every time you get past a trauma, that you heal a trauma, you level up. So the more stuff that they crap on you, the more opportunity that they're giving you to become wiser and stronger. And it takes a very strong soul to be put into a scapegoat position. Imagine a family dynamic where everyone is screwing up and all of their screw-ups get piled onto one person. That one person is blamed for all the screw-ups. It takes a very strong person, a very strong soul, to be able to withstand that weight, that pressure, that pain, that responsibility. And I don't want anyone to misconstrue from this that you should put yourself in a position to be abused. Never should you ever put yourself in a position to be abused. You should never choose to put yourself in a position to be abused or to accept being abused and continue to let people abuse you because you think it's for your higher good. Your higher good comes from moving out of the abuse. Your higher good comes from liberating yourself from the abuse. That's the lesson that you came here to learn. You don't learn more by sitting there and letting people punch you in the face. Literally or proverbially, meaning physically or emotionally or psychologically or whatever, spiritually, you don't learn more by volunteering to sit there and take it. You learn by realizing that you are worthy of more and that you do not deserve to be treated like that and standing up for yourself. That is the lesson. That is where you learn. All I'm saying is that the more they crap on you as you're liberating yourself or before you realize that you can liberate yourself, the stronger it made you. So let's move on to the last aspect of this, which directly ties in, is ancestral healing. So I believe that many of us strong souls chose to incarnate because we all choose our families, our lifetimes ahead of time. Yes, we have free will. And yes, we can make choices to change our journey once we're here. But before we incarnate, we chose our parents. We choose parents or environments to be born into based on what we need to learn at a soul level for our own personal growth, what our mission is in terms of how we plan to serve others when we get here. So for example, I experienced narcissistic abuse and so on. I healed from that. I learned from it. And now I'm trying to teach other people how to get through it as well. So whatever your service to others' mission is as well. So the first reason is your own personal soul growth. The second reason is your mission, your greater purpose, your service to others' mission. And the third thing is for ancestral healing. And what that means is that our genes have an accumulation of information from previous generations. There's a study called epigenetics that will explain a little bit more of that if you're interested in it. Epigenetics. This is not a woo-woo thing. This is a scientifically tangible, provable thing. For example, on my mother's side, my great-grandparents and my grandparents lived through a war by living in a cave. They survived the war by living in a cave. It was like the entire village was living in a cave. It was a very big cave. This is documented stuff, people. So because they lived in a cave and they had no money and they lived in the darkness and there was probably a whole lot of stuff going on in that cave that no one ever talked about. Abuse, all kinds of terrible things, constant fear and anxiety, and not knowing if today was the day that you were going to be discovered by the Nazis and killed, illness that you couldn't go get medication for, people dying in front of you, children dying in front of you because there weren't resources to keep them alive. All of that trauma got passed down to my mother. Then my mother had all this in her genes. Both her parents, both lived in this cave. So all that trauma gets passed down to my mother's genes. So now my mother has all this genetic memory of living in a cave and going through all these traumas. Then, because both of her parents were traumatized and grew up in a cave, they didn't know any better for a lot of things. So the way that they raised their children was not the healthiest way to raise kids. And so that traumatized the kids even more. So the accumulation of genetic trauma, not just from their parents, then it goes back to their grandparents and their great-grandparents and so on, right? Trickling down the gene pool. But I'm just giving an example going back a couple of generations. So all this stuff gets piled up into the genetic memory that gets passed down to my mother. And then my grandparents don't know what they're doing when they're raising kids or how they're interacting with people. They're toxic in their own way, and that traumatizes their kids even more. So now my mother has that trauma. Then she gets into a relationship with a narcissist and is abused, and so she has that trauma. And then she has a kid with this narcissist, meaning me. So I genetically now have accumulated all the trauma from her lifetime and her parents' lifetime and their parents' lifetime and so on and so on. Plus being raised by a narcissist, I have my own childhood trauma from that. So all these generations of trauma, right? Genetically, psychologically, emotionally. Now I chose to incarnate at this point in the lineage. So being a strong soul, being an empath, being someone who chose to incarnate into that lineage means that you have an opportunity to heal not only yourself, but your ancestral lineage. And you heal the ancestral lineage by healing yourself. You also heal future generations by healing yourself. And some of you have already had kids before you're done your healing process, and that's okay, because you're also going to heal them by being a better parent, or trying to be a better parent, trying not to traumatize your kids as much as you were traumatized, and allowing your child the opportunity to heal whatever remains. So you're doing your healing, they're doing their healing, and whether it takes a couple generations or whatever, the future generations will be emotionally, physically, psychologically, spiritually healthier than ever before, than any generation before. In my situation, I don't have kids yet, if ever, we'll see. So I have the opportunity to do as much of the healing as possible before passing my genes down to the next generation. So one thing that I didn't mention before is that the expression of a gene is directly affected by its environment. The environment in which a gene is existing, living, directly affects how that gene expresses itself. So if you change the environment, you change the gene expression. So what I mean by environment is nutrients, toxins, attitudes, energy, all that stuff. How you think, how you feel, what you eat, all of it. All those things affect your genes. So if you can heal your genes and get them to a point where they are in a healthy environment and expressing themselves in a healthy way, then when you have kids, then they'll be inheriting genes with a healthy expression. And if you had kids before you were healed, that's fine too. All you got to do is change the environment that the kid is in, giving them the right nutrients, taking away the toxins, helping them learn to cope with stress and anger and sadness, and learning to be grateful of things and how to be happy and loving and kind. There you go. You have healed the lineage. So I believe that many of us chose this life because we were strong enough to take it on. So if you are dealing with more crap than the average person, it could be because you knew that you could take it and transform it. You came here to help and to heal. And you do so by healing yourself and then extending that to others when you're ready, at your own pace. So if you take more crap than other people, or if you find that people target you or bully you or whatever more than the average person, I want you to know that, first of all, it's not you, it's them. Second, there is nothing to be ashamed of, because you are most likely a stronger soul that came here for a purpose, for a greater purpose. And also, you're not as alone as you may think, because there are a lot of us out there taking just as much crap as you are. I hope this served you. Thank you for joining me today and listening and spending your time with me. I have weekly episodes if you want to subscribe. Please check out the links in the description. There is my free course, Self-Love for Empaths, that you may very likely find use out of if you enjoyed this podcast episode. Also, please check out my YouTube channel, where you'll find a video that goes a little more in depth on ancestral healing, as well as other empath-related topics and self-love-related topics. You can leave me a comment there and let me know what you thought of this podcast. If you have any suggestions for future episodes or anything else, thank you for your time. I will see you again next week. Bye.